Have you ever tried to help someone only to end up feeling drained, unappreciated, and even guilty for not doing more? If that resonates with you, stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we'll unveil a startling truth. The Bible actually warns us about 8 types of people we must never help. Welcome to The Faithful Scribe, where we explore holy Bible stories and uncover lessons that many overlook. Today's topic, God's warning. 8 types of people you must never help. Biblical warnings will challenge your assumptions about unconditional assistance. We've all heard sermons on kindness, charity, and the call to love our neighbors. Yet Scripture also highlights the risk of enabling destructive attitudes. Constantly rescuing unrepentant individuals can drain us emotionally and spiritually, especially if they scoff at our efforts. The Bible cautions against helping those who refuse to see their need for change. Before we dive in, let's be crystal clear. This isn't about shutting our hearts to genuine need. Rather, it's a call to discernment, making sure that our best intentions aren't wasted on those who treat us, or God's wisdom, with disdain. By the end, you'll see how biblical truths can free you from the guilt of trying to rescue people who won't receive genuine help. Now let's begin our journey through these 8 warning signs. You might be surprised at how relevant they are in everyday life, whether you're dealing with friends, relatives, or even acquaintances at church. Our first 2 types of people revolve around pride and deliberate blindness. We all encounter proud individuals who see any form of aid as an insult. Their attitude is best summed up by Proverbs 26:12, which says, "Do you see a person wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them." The proud person not only rejects help, but views it as a personal attack. In the end, the helper becomes drained, feeling as if every offering is twisted into judgment. You might pour time, energy, and prayer into guiding them, only to be met with accusations that you're undermining their independence. This is why Scripture warns that trying to rescue the proud often proves fruitless. Before we continue, here's a lesser-known biblical fact. In the story of King Uzziah, set in Chronicles 26, his pride led him to unlawfully enter the temple to burn incense. Though initially successful as a king, his arrogance brought about his downfall and leprosy. This rarely highlighted detail illustrates how pride can blind even the successful, making them deaf to correction. Second, we have those who practice deliberate blindness. People who refuse to acknowledge reality, even when truth stands plainly before them. They discount warnings, disregard evidence, and sidestep accountability. Attempting to help them is like trying to shine a light in a room where someone insists on keeping their eyes shut. Jesus encountered such stubbornness in religious leaders who refused to see his miracles as divine. Ultimately, you cannot heal someone who demands to remain in the dark, so the Bible advises discernment rather than endless struggle in vain. Next, we address the constant critic and the habitual manipulator. Both can drain you to the point of spiritual exhaustion. The constant critic is someone who never expresses gratitude, only pointing out flaws or shortfalls in your help. They find reasons to belittle your best efforts, ensuring you feel inadequate. Ecclesiastes 7:5 suggests it's better to heed a wise rebuke than to listen to the song of fools. But there's a difference between constructive feedback and relentless negativity. If the critic's only goal is to tear you down, the Bible warns that you're casting pearls before swine, Matthew 7:6, expending precious effort on those who trample kindness underfoot. Then comes the manipulator, skilled at tugging on heartstrings while refusing genuine transformation. You might pay their bills, but they keep mismanaging funds. You might bail them out of crises, but they create new ones. They say the right words to secure more assistance, yet never take personal responsibility. Galatians 6:5 tells us each person should carry their own load, implying that enabling destructive patterns can hamper growth. Continually rescuing a manipulator fosters dependence, not deliverance. In both these cases, the helper walks away drained and confused. Why aren't these people changing? The truth is they don't want to change. They want to exploit your goodwill. Scripture reminds us to love our neighbor, but also to guard our hearts from needless harm. Understanding these biblical boundaries frees us to invest our efforts in places where the seeds of kindness can genuinely grow, rather than be trampled or twisted. Now we arrive at two more destructive types, the perpetual victim and the unteachable rebel. The perpetual victim thrives on a cycle of self-pity and crisis. Whenever you offer solutions, they respond with reasons why nothing will ever work. They can exhaust your emotional reserves because every attempt to help is met with hopelessness. Proverbs 15:32 warns that those who disregard discipline despise themselves, implying that ignoring good counsel deepens one's misery. If someone refuses to accept any solution, continuing to help often cements them in their victimhood, a loop with no end in sight. The unteachable rebel, meanwhile, rejects all guidance. Far from innocent mistakes, their opposition is deliberate, a bold face turned against wisdom. This goes beyond pride, it's open defiance. The Bible addresses this in 1 Samuel 15:23, equating rebellion with witchcraft. When you spend countless hours offering help to someone resolutely determined to do the opposite, you'll likely suffer needless frustration. Scripture calls us to plant seeds of truth, but forcing the harvest when the ground is barren is futile. If you find these insights valuable, remember to subscribe to The Faithful Scribe. Our channel explores overlooked biblical stories and profound spiritual lessons you won't often hear in Sunday sermons. By joining our community, you'll stay connected to transformative teachings designed to strengthen your walk of faith. So keep these two categories, perpetual victims and unteachable rebels, in mind. If someone's identity is rooted in refusal to grow or accept change, it may be wise to limit your help, channeling your love toward those who genuinely seek restoration. Our next two categories delve even deeper into the emotional toll of unreciprocated help. The resentful dependent and the covert betrayer. The resentful dependent latches onto others for support, but seethes with bitterness underneath. They might accept your aid financially, emotionally, or otherwise, yet they secretly resent feeling beholden or exposed. Instead of gratitude, they harbor anger that you're in a position to help them at all. Over time, this hidden hostility can erupt, leaving you blindsided by accusations of control or superiority. Proverbs 13:10 states that pride breeds quarrels, and resentful dependence thrives on such silent friction. You end up weary, questioning why your sincere efforts yielded hostility rather than growth. Then there's the covert betrayer, someone who pretends to value your guidance, but uses it to manipulate or undermine you. Perhaps they gather personal details under the guise of seeking counsel, only to gossip or sabotage later. Think of Judas, who walked with Jesus but ultimately betrayed him with a kiss. Luke 22:48. Indeed, betrayal often emerges from close quarters, disguised as friendship or loyalty. If you keep trying to help a covert betrayer, you're feeding a situation that could harm you or others spiritually. Scripturally, we see repeated cautions to watch for wolves in sheep's clothing, Matthew 7:15. That principle extends beyond church contexts into any relationship in which hidden agendas lurk. Recognizing these patterns can save you from heartbreak and misdirected efforts. Loving your neighbor doesn't mean ignoring dangerous attitudes or refusing to acknowledge betrayal. Jesus himself was not naive. He warned his disciples to be wise as serpents while remaining harmless as doves in Matthew 10:16. Finally, we come to two particularly draining relationships: the endlessly ungrateful and the persistently arrogant. The endlessly ungrateful person takes everything you give, yet never shows an ounce of appreciation. They treat help as an entitlement, not a blessing. This ingratitude can erode your willingness to extend kindness in the future, fueling cynicism. The Bible speaks strongly against ingratitude, reminding us through Romans 1:21 that failing to honor God or express thanks leads to futile thinking. On a smaller scale, failing to recognize the contributions of others fosters bitterness and stunts personal growth. Closely related is the persistently arrogant, distinct from the proud category we introduced earlier. Here, arrogance is so ingrained that the individual actively scorns any attempt at benevolence. They might verbally dismiss your efforts, calling you weak or naive. In turn, you're stuck trying to prove your goodwill, which only inflates their ego further. This perpetual cycle often ends with resentment on both sides, as you question why you're pouring love into a bottomless pit of hubris. Scripture repeatedly highlights humility as the key to receiving grace, James 4:6. Where humility is absent, meaningful help becomes nearly impossible. These final two types exemplify how biblical wisdom warns us against feeding dynamics that undermine spiritual health. By setting boundaries, you honor God's instruction to exercise discernment. Not everyone is ready or willing to be helped, and sometimes stepping back protects both your well-being and theirs. As we'll see in our conclusion, adopting such discernment doesn't signify lovelessness, but a matured, scripturally grounded approach. We've uncovered 8 types of people the Bible warns us never to help: the proud, the deliberately blind, the constant critic, the habitual manipulator, the perpetual victim, the unteachable rebel, the resentful dependent, the covert betrayer, the endlessly ungrateful, and the persistently arrogant. Yes, that's more than 8 labels, but they overlap in ways that highlight the same underlying principles. All these categories share a common thread: an unwillingness to acknowledge personal responsibility or receive genuine growth. Scripture doesn't call us to abandon compassion, it calls us to wise compassion. Jesus, the ultimate model of mercy, also walked away at times when people's hearts were closed. The Apostle Paul invested in communities ready to hear truth, not incessantly in those hardened against it. Exercising godly discernment prevents us from enabling toxic cycles, letting us reserve our emotional and spiritual energy for those who truly seek change. Does it feel uncomfortable to create boundaries? Possibly, yet it aligns with the biblical principle of stewardship. Managing our resources, including time and emotional capacity, responsibly. Enabling someone who rejects correction harms both parties. By recognizing the individuals Scripture warns us not to help blindly, we safeguard our callings, relationships, and mental health. Thank you for joining me on The Faithful Scribe. If this message resonated with you, consider sharing it and inviting others to reflect on these scriptural insights. Remember, discerning who we help isn't selfish. It's faithfulness to God's instruction. May you walk forward with renewed clarity, balancing mercy with the wisdom to protect your God-given peace.